Hi, welcome back to Waxing On Wednesday. And today, one of my first albums. This one, my first Frank Zappa. Now, we've talked about Zappa and the Mothers a number of times on here. He's no stranger to this show. This album, 1970, I picked it up in 71. And this was the first time I'd heard Frank Zappa. Now, back in the day, this was, like say, early 70s, I was living outside of Kingston, Ontario. Kingston had a radio show on in the evenings called Undercurrent. I believe, I'm going to say maybe Gary Parr was the guy that was hosting it. But what he'd do is, it was around 10:30 at night, he'd play an album in its entirety. So he was kind of introducing new albums to everybody. And of course, this was back before we, had all the equipment to be able to tape it, so nobody was pirating it off the radio or anything. But it gave you a chance to hear some of the albums before you went out and bought them. Especially albums like this, where, you're not getting a lot of airplay on the radio. I'm laying down my money. I may only be able to afford one album a week. I don't want one that's going to be a clunker, right? I want something that I can be sure is going to be a good album. And this way, by doing his show, you got a chance to hear it. You say, okay, I like that, I'm going to buy it, or no, that's not for me, you take a pass. So it was a great show for the consumers, but a great show to get music out there that wasn't really getting played anywhere else. This was on, I believe, was CKLC, maybe in Kingston. Okay, the album. Third solo album for Frank Zappa. We'd already had Lumpy Gravy and Hot Rats, which was, again, quite a change. I remember, I've told you a few times about a friend of mine whose sister had all these great albums, and I'll tell you, this was one of them. Hot Rats was one I remember seeing earlier. I never got a chance to listen to it, but again, clued me into Zappa, who that was. She'd had the Freewheelin' Bob Dylan. She had Simon and Garfunkel's Bridgewater Troubled Waters. Like a lot of the albums that turned out to be classic. John Mayall, USA Union. First I saw a copy of that was one of hers at his place. Anyways, this album, 1971, third solo album. Things are starting to change. The music's not the same as it was with the Mothers of Invention. It's kind of an extension of what happened in Hot Rats, but not as much instrumentals. More vocals on here. Hot Rats was heavy on the instrumental side, and they call it kind of a jazz album. This one, not so much. This one, here's the cast of players we've got. We've got obviously Zappa on guitar and vocals. We've got Ian Underwood on organ. We got Max Bennett playing bass. Again, we've heard his name a few times. Ainsley Dunbar on drums. We also add, let me see who we've got here, Jeff Simmons on bass, George Duke, great jazz man there playing organ. We've got the Fluorescent Leech and Eddie. Now, later they shortened it down to Flo and Eddie. This is the first appearance of Flo and Eddie on the Zappa albums. And Flo and Eddie are Mark Volman and Howard Kalin from the Turtles. When they started joining him, they billed them now as the Mothers instead of the Mothers of Invention. Everything had kind of changed. The content of the lyrics was totally different. The shows were different. The music had turned a corner from what they were doing with the Mothers of Invention. This album is the first appearance of Flo and Eddie. Okay, so we got Flo and Eddie on here. Who else do we have that's new that we haven't talked about? Sugarcane Harris joins here on Chunga's Revenge for organ part. We've also got, let me see, Ian Underwood on grand piano and tenor sax. So he's doing triple duty here, organ, piano, and sax. So kind of a stripped down version. Some of the people we recognize, but a lot of the Mothers are gone. Different band he's got backing him up. Now it says on here that all the vocals in this album are a preview of the story of 200 Motels that'll be coming soon. Now if you remember, 200 Motels was this movie. It had a limited run in the theaters. Of course, it was not really something that was going to appeal to the masses. When I listened to the 200 Motels album, I did not feel that this reflected what was showing up in 200 Motels. It was totally different than what I heard on Chunga's Revenge. Now, even though he claimed it was kind of a forerunner of what was going to happen, I didn't feel it was at all the same. But, again, worth checking out. Okay, songs on here. One live one from Nancy and Mary Music, recorded at the Tyrone Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis. Other than that, it's all recorded at the record plant. And we've got Transylvania Boogie, instrumental Road Ladies, 20 Small Cigars, three parts of the Nancy and Mary music. We've got Tell Me You Love Me, Would You Go All the Way, Chunga's Revenge, another instrumental solo, sax solo in there. Rudy Wants to Buy You a Drink, and Charlena, probably the most straight ahead tune that might have gotten airplay. Just give you an idea, there's the other side of the album, lots of information about the players, lots of information about the recording. We got some artwork in here about the mutant sax or mutant vacuum cleaner that's playing, representing, I believe, Chunga here out around the campfire. It was a good introduction. It didn't prepare me for what's coming later. Of course, obviously the next album out was Mother's 71, and I mean, not an album you'd play for a lot of people, right? Their live stage show was very different from what was depicted in here. And it was very different from what I had when I bought my Mother's Invention albums. I think my next one was You're Only In It For The Money. Not at all the same style of what this was, but this was a great introduction. Great instrumental, some great guitar playing by Zappa, some fun songs in there. It was really, I thought, a classic and probably one of the best of his catalog for people unfamiliar with what they do. It was a good introduction. It was really accessible for a lot of people. And again, how can you beat a fun cover like that? So there you are. My first Frank Zappa album, Chunga's Revenge, in June of 1971. That's it for today. We'll be back with our last video Friday. I think we're looking at a concert by Joe Cocker. Till then, everybody take care, stay safe. See you here on Friday.